Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, any members of the public who are watching. Welcome. I've had apologies from Councillor Kidd, Councillor Moynihan and Councillor Robinson. I've got Councillor David Nevitt, who's substituting today from Doncaster, whichever person. Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to agenda item 2, urgent items and announcements. I haven't got any today. No, none. Item 3, items to be considered by the in the absence of the public and press, and none today. Item 4, declaration of interest by any members. I've had none notified. Anybody got anything they wish to declare? Forever hold your peace. Okay, thank you very much. Right, okay. Reports from and questions by members. I've had none on item 5. Item 6, questions from members of the public. I have had none. Minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of November. So everybody should have had them. Anybody got anything they wish to raise? Are you content? And are you content that it's an accurate record of the minutes of the last meeting? Okay, take that. Thank you. Right, item number 8, review of the action log. Updates to matters arising and provided in the action log provided in particular. 3 appendices are attached regarding actions on Simca's translation protocols, which I had attached somewhere in here. Okay. Yeah.
Press the bit marked press, yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, on the protocols, I think we're looking to see if Simca's actually got a protocol or policy on translations and how we approach that and making information accessible. I guess the answer is no, so because it's just a sort of someone's commentary, I don't know whose it is even. Should we be asking whether it's worth putting time into addressing how we get materials out there, in what circumstances we do translations, because I guess the officers may not know generally and may have to deal with requests.
Is that something we should be looking at, Sarah? Do you think? I mean,
well,
is
if you
it
as
a
a committee
small
are
body
interested,
work?
we can take it away and put you in touch with
Just so that if there is a procedure as implementation rather than after the fact, rather as that should be before, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Just have a look at that and see, because I can't believe it needs to be traffic light. So this is what we'll be looking at, where we're going to implement a policy in terms of translation and what we're going to look at doing. Okay. The next part is the PM's response to a letter from the Mayor, which everybody should have available to them. Any comments on that?
All right, I'll tell you why I'm laughing. It's very Prime Minister's apparently commending Mr Coppard for bringing Sheffield's tram network under mayoral control was no mean feat. I mean, it was just the fact that the 25-year contract expired and it came back by default. But, you know, let's not take the credit away from the guy. Sorry, but it made me chuckle.
The other item we've got on those is a response to the Mayor's pledge on a single point of entry for schools in South Yorkshire. Any comments on that?
Only one question. What is the single point of entry for skills? Because it's not apparent from this page.
No, it isn't entirely apparent. If you...
Well, I suppose the query was around it's a pledge, his manifesto pledge. We can ask for more detail if that's what the committee wants.
So it's not actually a thing that exists yet.
No, it's a pledge.
Lovely. So in terms of the pledge, what our skill strategy implementation plan includes is the creation of a single skills platform, which will be a online place that would be the single front door, one point of entry for people to access skills provision across South Yorkshire, which I'm a bit later going to update on the progress of the skills strategy implementation plan and can cover it off there wider.
Shall we ask you later in more detail on that, because obviously it's not to tease it out of you. Okay, thank you for that on this item, but I think there'll be more questions further down the agenda when you're officially on. Okay, thank you. Any updates on the action log? Blah blah blah. Here. That anybody want to? Shall I go through on the page, the first page of the action log? Shall I just read the headlines? So we've got the completed actions, which are the South Yorkshire Renewal Fund. On that as main, the tram on page 2, tram mobilisation, and then the committee work plan, the Mayor's Safe Space to Sleep, which is coming up, active travel, where we had a workshop on, some Mayor Scrutiny is another thing that we've had. Okay, so that's really the action log, I think, is it? Okay. Any questions on that? Right, we'll move on to review of latest forward plan of key decisions. Give me a second. Here we go. Sorry, I found it now. Right, gain share funding. That's page 25 on the agenda. One of the things that we got is that, Douglas, I was going to ask about, because the gain share funding, we had to return some of the money. Do we know why this was the case? Why we weren't able to spend it?
I'm happy to relay the question to officers. I won't be able to answer at the moment.
Douglas?
Yeah, that's a good point to pick up on. If we're returning gain share funding, it'd be useful to know how much as well, so if we can find that out. The two specific things. On the airport one, obvious questions is how much grant funding is on there, because it's identified on the other approvals of grant. And some of it says is due to be exempt, but so the question is, well, whose interests are being covered here?
Which page are you referring to?
Sorry, on page 25, it's that first line. So on the item of gain share approval of grant funding for South Yorkshire Airport City. So the question is, how much grant funding is the item about? And on the exempt information, whose interests are being protected here? What's the reason for it? I don't know if anyone can answer that now.
Right, okay. We've had some information at a recent Mayor's Chairs, Vice Chairs meeting, where basically we can look at some of the exempt information, but we'd have to take it under Part B of the agenda if we were to have a further look at this, which may be appropriate to understand why the money has been returned, because I've been led to believe that there was a recent ruling regarding Tees Valley, where the Scrutiny Committee should have access to all exempt items if they take it in Part B of an agenda.
So I suppose there's two separate points there. One is what should be in the open part of this action log, which should be publicly available. I mean, it probably should say how much grant we're talking about, whether it's £2 or £200 million, and separate question about what's exempt and for whose interests. But I think it's a really sensible point to bring up the need for scrutiny of proper documents at some point. That's a separate
Brian.
Usually, it should be me.
I'll take that one.
Usually exempt money because it's a business. They're dealing with a private business, so it's exempt because it's protecting the company's who's involved, but it's a valid question, but usually it's due down to a business contract or something.
Yes, so there are a number of potential exemptions that are set out in the legislation for why material may not be made publicly available. But Councillor, you're absolutely right that the financial or business affairs of the combined authority or a third party is one that is commonly present in the papers.
Good. So, I mean, just to think about that, what I'm thinking is in terms of governance. So in terms of governance, it's generally in the public interest to know who's making what decisions about public money, especially when it's going to benefit private individuals. So that's the reason for having openness, and I completely understand this legislation to protect certain people in certain situations. But I'm just saying, someone in here has already made a decision that someone's interests need to be protected, or they think it should be protected. We might or might not take a different view on that, but I was just wondering, you know, who's made that decision, whose interests are they protecting, and how much money is at stake.
Chair officers would advise Mary why the interest will be protected. Let's be fair about it, it's a company, it's an organisation. If there's a reason why a paper's exempt, usually a monitoring officer would make the decision why that paper needs to be exempt, or that part of the agenda needs to be exempt.
I think that what we've got to look at next time is a bit with this, once we get with this advice, that is that if there are exempt parts, whether we wish to look at them in part B of an agenda. Okay.
I suppose the alternative is also you've got a committee briefing booked in again in a week's time, where some of that information may be covered with the committee.
I think that's the way we can look at that and then see whether we take it up further. Okay.
I'll just say, if I can, I mean, I think it is probably sensible to pick it up at the briefing, given that it's booked in for next week. Just generally, I mean, otherwise I would say, could we have specific answers to those questions circulated? You know, as to who's made the decision, whose interests. But we perhaps don't need to in this case, because we've got a briefing where hopefully someone can answer that question next week.
So Councillor, what I can answer today is in terms of the determination of whether information is treated as exempt will be a decision for the Combined Authority Board, having considered the recommendation of officers. So that will be a resolution for the board on the day to consider the recommendation of officers, decide whether the information should be exempt, and then the item will proceed accordingly.
Well, just to push back on that, that's not the case because, of course, the agenda for this meeting has already been published. The board hasn't met to make that resolution. The decision's been made by someone, probably an officer, not to provide that information to the public when otherwise it would have a duty to do so. I mean, I'm just saying someone's made the decision. I'm not saying it's improper in any way. That's normal functioning, but someone's made some decision somewhere about something, and as we're a scrutiny committee, it's the sort of question we should ask.
Okay, Councillor, we're happy to circulate answers after.
Well, obviously there's a name against on this, so this person, I presume that we need to ask. Yep. Okay. So that's page 25, page 26. Any questions on that? No. Page 27, appointment of technical partner under a framework contract as a lead line. Page 28. Where we seem to be taking, where the repairing, it's embedded rail repairs, but it seems to be the tram network appears to be in quite a state from my understanding. Procurement of a new customer relationship management system for that. Okay, page 29. Housing fund the Brownfield Housing Fund, an investment zone, sports legacy, shared prosperity fund applications, quite a lot there, which I think on the prosperity fund, that's all for Rotherham, isn't it? There's Rotherham, Barnsley, Sheffield. Yeah, sorry. Any questions on that, Douglas?
The question is, on the bottom, on the people and skills bit, did Sheffield and Doncaster get anything there, or is there a page missing?
We'll have a look into that. I think it's more likely to be a page missing.
I thought it might be.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I'm not sure it is. I think that in the people and skills that Doncaster and Sheffield didn't qualify. I think is my understanding for that funding, and it was only for Barnsley and Rotherham, personally. So if you'd like to check that, Sarah, but I think that Sheffield and Doncaster didn't qualify for whatever reasons they were.
Can just
sorry.
pick up on that. So actually, it's a serious point. I assumed there was a page missing. If you could check that, Sarah, that would be very helpful, and circulate that. But also, if Sheffield and Doncaster didn't qualify, could we have a short note as to why not?
I can confirm right now, there's a bit of the page that's been cut off. So on our Live Forward plan online, Sheffield City Council, under People and Skills, have a total pot to draw from of £3,169,308. City of Doncaster Council have a total pot of £1,823,518. And we'll get that rectified, certainly in the next.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. I know there was one fund where there was 2 of the 4 councillors that didn't qualify, and I just presumed it was that one. Right, we'll move on now to item 10, Skills Strategy Implementation. Joe Gardner, welcome as you make your way to the seat for again. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Members. So this is a verbal update following a presentation that came in November to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which was looking at skills strategy implementation. So just to briefly recap, our skills strategy was published last year. It was predicated on 3 main issues here in South Yorkshire: high levels of economic inactivity, a low skilled workforce, and low productivity across our region being above national average or worse than national average. Our strategy contains 3 missions: moving people closer to the labour market, increasing attainment of core skills, and developing a high skilled workforce. And this contains 7 flagship programmes, which includes a skills platform, previously mentioned, offers for young people, technical education, and community hubs, among others. In November, we brought an update about the implementation plan, focusing on the development of an outcomes framework that would demonstrate the impact of skills strategy being implemented across all of our provision, and some progress measures and KPIs to support this. So in terms of updates since then, we have had further engagement sessions regarding the KPIs and the outcomes framework, as well as those progress measures. And we have got support, broad support for both the ambition and content contained within those draft outcomes framework. And we are currently receiving feedback which is feeding into revisions to the implementation plan, which will go to chief executives in March of this year and then onwards to the MCA for approval. And worth mentioning that alongside this, we have undertaken some analysis of our adult skills fund spend over the first 3 years post-devolution to determine alignment between that and our skills strategy. And worth mentioning that the delivery over those 3 years predates the publication of the skills strategy, but there is approximately 60% alignment in terms of delivering against the 3 mission areas, and therefore we're taking that forward as well to feed into the recommendations for how we both commission new but also pivot existing activity to better deliver those strategic aims.
we've been talking in the past about metrics and that sort of thing. Well, you've just thrown out a figure there about 60% alignment. I mean, what would you expect it to be? What expectations would you think that your alignment with your spend and with the strategy, is that good or bad? I mean, 60% could be in it. It could be fantastic, but it could be truly terrible. But I mean, how does that? What does it mean?
It doesn't dictate a positive or negative because the strategy itself postdates the delivery, if that makes sense. But I suppose it gives us an idea of the scale of the task in terms of how much realignment we have to do over our main source of funding, which by volume is bigger than anything else in the employment and skills space, that of our delivery, just shy of 2/3 is already delivering broadly in line with how we want it to deliver, but a third or more needs to be realigned to absolutely be focused on achieving the outcomes we're aiming to see from our skills strategy.
How would you find that in terms of the skills strategy, in terms of future going forward? I mean, and the alignment. I mean, what things do you think that you would need to improve to make sure that it was much more closely aligned with the strategy and the spend of the funds? Because obviously money's tight, as we always say, and it's making sure that we achieve, and obviously with skills in South Yorkshire particularly, we need to make sure they're much more closely aligned, and that we're fully utilising that money. And 60% is sort of like, yeah, it's fine, but you know, it's only just over halfway there, really.
So I think the question is, what do we need to do to make sure we're better aligned, if I'm hearing you correctly? Yeah. So primarily that is focusing on the cohorts we target and the provision that we offer to those cohorts to make sure the right people are receiving the right provision. So to use the example from the skills strategy, where we are trying to move people furthest from the labour market, closer to the labour market, ensuring that the wraparound support we offer goes to those people who are furthest from the labour market and brings them closer, and where we're talking about development of key skills and increasing the attainment of that, making sure we're focusing on those people who whose education level in general may be higher, but are lacking potentially their level 2 English, maths and digital skills.
Josh?
Thanks for your presentation. I just wondered, are you able to tell us anything about the free courses for jobs allocations between 2021 and 2023 and what went wrong there?
Could you explain what you mean by what went wrong, please? I'll answer.
Analysis from FE Weekly showed an underspend of 74%.
Yes, so free courses for jobs, as with as was adult education budget and adult skills fund, has been a journey since devolution towards an improving picture. And in the first year of devolution, we delivered our free courses for jobs purely across our grant providers. In the second year, we expanded that to commission procured provision to support it, and that showed an uptick in the volume of delivery. And then in last year, we've come closer than ever before to being on target towards delivering the full allocation, which was 89%, I believe. But it has been a case of increasing the amount of provision we're able to offer and making a distinction between what the offer is under Adult Skills Fund and free courses. Free courses is exclusively level 3 provision, whereas Adult Skills Fund covers a much broader remit. And so there is a synergy between the progression of one and the other, but free courses, between Adult Skills Fund and free courses for jobs delivery, but free courses was very weak in the first year, and so the driving up of performance has taken longer, and we are still not as close to 100% delivery as we were for Adult Skills Fund in the last academic year.
So what do you think went wrong then? Because that analysis showed that Simca was the worst performing mayoral combined authority in the country. So what do you think actually went wrong there? Was it a case of staffing, planning? What was it? I mean, granted, there's been some criticism around the delivery of that from central government, but I just wondered from your perspective, what are some of the issues there that perhaps you've learned from, etc.? Because you said it year on year it's getting better, right?
I think the distinguishing it from the wider Adult Skills Fund offer was probably the primary reason why we struggled. I think we were trying to deliver everything in the first year, and Adult Skills Fund could include the delivery of level 3 elements, so there is an overlap one way from adult skills into free courses, but not back and forth. So our development of a discrete free courses for jobs offer didn't really start properly until the second year of delivery, and it was a slow start that has increased since then.
Yeah, go on, go on.
And just on that, I just wondered as well, what work have you been doing with the 4 local authorities on things like this? Because when I challenged my local authorities strategic leadership team on this, they hadn't a clue, frankly, what that was. You know, the chief exec and all the directors were present, and not one of them could actually tell me what this was. So I just wondered, is there any work there between yourselves and the 4 local authorities?
Yes, absolutely there is. With free courses for jobs provision, there is a distinction because not all the local authorities are directly involved in the delivery of it. So we have colleges and local authorities within our region who deliver, with the exception of Rotherham Borough Council, Metropolitan Borough Council, all deliver Adult Skills Fund, but the delivery of free courses is far more focused with our college partners rather than our local authorities. So those discussions do happen, and we have tried to introduce some flexibilities off the back of discussions with both colleges and local authorities. An example for free courses for jobs is income threshold by which you can qualify to undertake the course, and try to say this diplomatically without being crude. A higher level qualification, having a same level of income threshold, may mean that the target market we are trying to focus on are potentially omitted, i.e. if you are someone who is in prospect of doing a level 3 course and the income threshold is set at a level that means you could have a relatively low paying job and not qualify, that's been a burden to achieve in getting the learners through. So in feedback from partners, we have introduced that, and that in part has contributed to the increased delivery and greater learner volumes accessing that.
Okay, thank you. David?
Thank you, Chair. Looking back at the 60% was a target, not all young people are academically astute and can achieve a level 2, but they can actually do what's required of them. So is there another metric that you need to look at to go to say that these people are just as capable, but it's just that they haven't got that particular qualification, and how we then bring that into the equation?
Yes, 100%, and that takes us to a sort of wider approach that is being embodied through the Pathways to Work Commission that you may or may not be aware of here, which looks from an employment employment support perspective at supporting people into employment. But under that, we are increasingly looking at what we're calling progress measures or distance travelled. So trying to move away from just the pure absolute outcomes of someone achieving, for example, a level 2 or gaining a job, and recognising that for an individual, progress could be a wider definition than that. So being in a position to undertake a volunteering opportunity or obtaining skills in an area short of a formal qualification is still a positive move for an individual. So the outcomes framework will be cognizant of that and reflect those progress measures, as well as the meat and potatoes of levels of people achieving a level 2.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thanks. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here and whether meat and potatoes came into it. It won't be your fault right today, but I'm not sure why we haven't got a written report on this. Would it be helpful if you could write something and then circulate it to us so we could have perhaps a better understanding of what's gone on? And I think, to be fair, it's right to us delve into Josh's questions of what went wrong. And you referred to the story that was in FE Weekly. And I think it's probably something that we should be concerned about, because I mean, I don't think it's just this mayoral authority, but with the transfer of funding away from local authorities into mayor, it seems to be a bit of a pattern. Maybe I think you say that South Yorkshire was the worst one of all the mayoral authorities, but it has been a widespread pattern there. And I think we probably ought to have some assurance that something's being done about this. I didn't quite follow everything you said there, so I don't really know what's gone wrong, but clearly it's been a problem. And I'm just recalling, I was just racking my brains, when there were all the when the funding was transferred to Simca, there were quite major cuts to funding a lot of community organisations in Sheffield, and I don't know about the other districts, but quite possibly the same. There was quite a lot of anger there about, you know, community organisations being undermined, and I don't know if this is the same problem as what you're describing here, or not, but that whole area of adult skills and free courses for jobs and so on. I think I'd like to know a bit more, and I don't feel I know much more than when I came in this afternoon. So not your fault for being here today, but we could probably do with a fairly detailed written explanation of what has gone on. Would that be
I think
possible
one
to
of the
do?
things is that we could have a deep dive meeting via Teams to try and, if you can produce something more in detail that at some point in the very near future. I mean, I know we're quite pressed, but if we can find because you know we've got I'd like to be able to tease out what's been going on, the questions that Josh and David have asked, and Douglas. We just need to be assured that going forward, because that's what we are as a scrutiny committee, going forward, that we're giving you that we're looking at and giving as good advice as possible to make sure that these things don't necessarily happen. You know, the underspend where the money had to be returned to the government, that sort of thing. That potentially that is something that we need to be looking at as a scrutiny committee. If that's, would that be appropriate? Would you be able to do that?
Yeah, and just yes, absolutely. Just so I'm clear on the ask, this is for across free courses for jobs, an update on the
Free courses and the ongoing skills strategy to see what's moving forward and what you intend to avoid repeating. Because I mean, the free course of jobs, you know, not a good look at the amount of money that had to be returned, but you know, we're not going to get that money back, are we? So it's looking at how, as a scrutiny committee, we can look forward to how it's spent as a hero.
Sorry, just coming back to Councillor Johnson's comments about what I'd also be interested to see was what community learning's happening now. So what kind of courses are being offered out in the communities, and I think what Councillor Johnson was referring to a few years ago when a lot of the funding was pulled from community organisations. I was working at the time for a small charity that in the end had to close just because that funding was pulled for adult education. We provided quite a lot of adult education in the Darnall ward. Them levels haven't come back to Darnall yet. I still hear quite a lot of barriers why people can't access adult education. A lot of it seems to be in the colleges, and for some people it's still quite difficult to get into the college to do that. So community learning is always something that people locally do ask me about. But if any money was sent back, due to us not being able to recruit people, I think we really need to know why, because you know the community that I represent it's a very low income community, and finding jobs for a lot of the young people who leave school without any qualification is really difficult. And something like this, which I hadn't heard about, so if I don't know about it, I wonder how would local people in my community know about it, and then that money was sent back. So just a bit more information about that, what happened, what, as you said, went wrong, because it does sound like something must have gone wrong if we weren't able to spend that money. So just a bit of a deeper dive in that area. Yeah.
Brian.
I'm getting all this about money being sent back, but will this money was due to be spent in COVID years, or was it after COVID? When will this money, why weren't it spent? That's not the question is, when you're sending money back, when you're bringing money to spend on education and adult education, and what years didn't this money get spent, or was it in COVID years, or what, because people couldn't deliver the education?
So, in part, it is COVID years. It's the 3 academic years that have been subject to the report are 21-22, so start in August 21, 22-23, 23-24, and if I'm hearing the recognition in the room right, it is the story of what has happened over those first 3 years. And I think we've touched on both free courses for jobs that was a subject of that, but also the community learning, which is distinct and does not form part of the free courses for jobs, but is part of the Adult Skills Fund. So the answer to the question isn't a single one, but I'm happy to bring back a more thorough report.
Just a quick question, because you talked about the authorities being involved. Did you say Rotherham hadn't been involved? It was run by private organisations?
No, sorry, that the delivery of the free courses for jobs and provision happens via, in Rotherham, primarily happens via RNN rather than the council directly delivering themselves.
Okay, I think I think my understanding is we will look at what the provision we're looking at. Provision in the future, we can ask questions, but I presume that we can ask the audit committee should be looking at why the money was spent back. Doesn't mean we can't cover it when it comes forward, but we've got to, as a scrutiny committee, we've got to look at forward and for planning and seeing what your skills strategy and how it's developing, and to making sure that it doesn't happen again. Obviously, the audit committee will be looking at why the money was sent back, and we can ask that they look at that. Okay, if that's the appropriate solution, everybody's happy with that. Okay.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, are we talking about getting a briefing back for us as well?
The brief. I think the briefing's taken as read. We'll have a deep dive. We can have it online. If any sort of slide, we put up with slides and that sort of thing. Then, so that's what with your future plans and how you are looking to maximise not just the bang for your buck, but to make sure that we're improving skills through all communities and the segments that have been missed out as well, and how we spend that sort of money in the skills strategy. That's what we'll be particularly looking for. Obviously, we as a committee will be more than interested in why the money was sent back, but I think that the main body of work for that will be the audit committee, is my understanding. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, go on.
I might just to say the Audit and Scrutiny Committee has received reports following 2 performance audits that have taken place in the last 2 academic years, which we can make reference to as well, if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Can I just check, are we having a written briefing? I think we do need the detail in writing, just because this discussion has shown that all sorts of things unravel when we come unprepared.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 11, which is community transport, and do a quick change over. We have Brian Edwards and Nathan Broadhead to give the presentation, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Brian Edwards. I'm the Assistant Director for Bus Services. I actually have my Director of Public Transport Operations, Lawrence Wilson, with me.
We've had a change.
Last minute change. The report is obviously in the pack, excuse me. So I'll just try to summarise that, and then obviously any questions that anybody may have. So, brief background, we have a service level agreement with community transport providers across all 4 local authorities. That's treated as one group of community transport providers. The grant is about £1.66 million per annum. That's paid to the lead operator, which is Rotherham Community Transport. They distribute it to the other community transport operators. The funding has not increased for about a decade. It's actually slightly reduced based on sort of CPI inflation. It's probably about a 25% plus reduction in real terms. Against that, post-COVID patronage reduction is in the region of about a 40% reduction. So that in some ways one sort of cancels out the other. Key issues that we've worked with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as many of you will know, so for about 12 months or so. So the key issues are that reducing patronage, and linked with that is, we think, a lack of profile across many communities. Separate to that is we're concerned that the age of the fleet is getting greater. There's been limited fleet renewal in recent years, and for various reasons I think there's been a bit of a reduced dialogue between Cllr and community transport operators, with changes and lack of personnel. And we do have some data, but again, probably not using that data or evaluating that data as well as we would like. So that was sort of a background. And in terms of the engagement with Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I know there's been a couple of meetings and there's been a workshop, etc. And key things that you've asked us to work on and you have supported with is how we can increase patronage, how we can raise awareness, how we can look at that fleet renewal opportunities again, and getting that right balance, that we don't want to really micromanage community transport operations. They're the experts at doing that, but recognising we are a major funding contributor, so we need to support them, but also challenge them as well. So it's getting that right mix. Yeah, we found the dialogue we've had with you really useful over the last 12 months, and it's really helped to steer us in what we need to prioritise. So just wanted to run through very quickly things that we have done and are doing, just to show that we are sort of going in the right direction, hopefully. So Lawrence and myself at director level have certainly started to take some control over this, and we've had a number of meetings with the lead community transport provider and one or two of the others as well, and we have other meetings in the diary with them, so they're starting to get to know us a bit better and vice versa. So that's good from that level. We are looking to review and update the service level agreement. It's over 10 years old. We feel there's room for improvement there in terms of the metrics, and yeah, so we want to do that and get some key performance indicators absolutely sort of embedded into that service level agreement. We've worked with our comms team to devise a marketing plan, and we're looking to get that signed off in the next few weeks. We've done a bit of a deep dive with Rotherham Community Transport as the lead operator with their financials, and using some knowledge that we have as officers as well to support them and challenge them on presenting them in a way that gives Cllr the best possible ability to understand them and advise if we're not comfortable with them. we've we've just received a new business case. Traditionally they were 5-year business cases. We're comfortable with a 1-year business case just for next year, just to get us through this interim period, and recognising we do have a new lead provider with Rotherham. They took over from Sheffield last year, so it's a bit of a learning curve for them as well. And we've appointed an officer within the public transport team who will have more time to lead on liaising and managing on the day-to-day side with that community transport relationship. So that's what we've done to date in the sort of probably 2 or 3 months since we last met with you. Things we need to just complete before the end of this current year or financial year are look at the financials of the other community transport operators, collect and collate a bit more data so we can have a clearer look of at things, get the business case finalised and signed off so that we can release the funding, which is what the service level agreement requires us to do. And we've got the first of what I hope is several community visits planned for next week to again get that, allow people to see firsthand the service, ask questions and experience it as well. So so that's where we hope to get to by the end of March. And then for next year we've got a wider programme where we'll implement this marketing programme over the sort of broader summer months, May till September. We say we can showcase the service. We will do a lot of sort of social and more traditional media engagement there. Full fleet review. We need to get the average age of the vehicles reduced. So we aim to produce a strategy for renewal, and that could include things like electrification of depots if we are looking to move to EVs. We are looking at a new reporting method that will support community transport operators in providing us with metrics that are sometimes traditional and quantitative. You know, things like how much does it cost per passenger journey is always going to be important. But with community transport, there are other metrics that are more qualitative that help capture what the individual and society benefits are of this type of transport. And there's, you know, there are programmes and things out there that can, methods that can help them do that they've not traditionally done. We'll continue the regular meetings with community transport operators. We'll work with them to get a probably a 5-year business plan ready for 2026. And we, with your blessing, we would hope to come back in the autumn of this year in 2025 to give you an update of how we're progressing with those things.
Thank you for that. A few questions I've got, but I don't know whether anybody's good. You talk about under the service level agreements. You talk about some about changing some of the key metrics. Was that what I heard you say? So what changes are you looking at? Because with your what you're looking at is the number of people using community transport. The last figures we saw that it had nearly halved pre and post COVID. What are the changes in use that particularly may have been able to be seen? And so that's the main thing. And when you talk about marketing, one of the particular things we asked about was whether that could be integrated with somewhere with the South Yorkshire passenger, you know, with the app, and whether people, rather than, you know, the traditional methods that have used to contact to book community transport, whether that's making any progress. That's the first couple of questions for me.
Sorry, were you on to comment? In terms of the service level agreement, we need to look at what data we get first. So at this stage, I don't think we have any sort of anything specific, but certainly say those metrics that try to capture the more unquantifiable things. We want to add into the service level agreement. It's as much as things like just ensure the data is given to us on a timely basis as well. and disaggregating that data again in terms of trying to understand quite where the challenges are, because as a lot of you will know, there are different elements to community transport in terms of shopper bus and group hire, etc. And we want to add things like sort of demographics in terms of the data that we don't have much of at the moment as well. So it's that type of thing, just diving a bit deeper rather than it focusing very much on how many passengers have there been and what's the cost of that.
Can I come in with? And just to add to that, there are some things that we feel we could understand the financial benefits of the grant funding that we are supporting them with. So we're keen to understand things such as vehicle occupancy rates, what times of day the vehicles are being used, so that we understand the fleet provision, whether it's fit for purpose, and actually making sure that we're investing a significant amount in. It costs a lot more per passenger for community transport service than it does for mainstream bus services that we support. So is this funding being used in the most cost effective way? And understanding things such as vehicle occupancy rates would help us to do that and see if we can encourage community transport to bring in more efficiencies. Now, in order to understand that, as Brian says, we need to get better with the data. And from the conversations we've had with our colleagues there, a lot of the systems that they use are quite old systems, and we need to look at updating that system just so we can then pull in much better data with which to be able to make better business decisions and be able to support things like the 5-year business plan.
Yes, so just a fundamental thing really. I mean, I can see where this is going. You talk about 10 years of steady decline, as in real terms cuts in funding availability. I mean, it is only £1.5 million, which is not that much for spending. Is this a decision of the Cllr board?
So, as I understand it, the funding has been rolling on a yearly basis, and the funding has been pending. The 5-year business plan would be submitted, and then every year funding would be released as and when the annual delivery plan would be agreed. So, delivery plan would be set, and then it would be agreed by the Transport Directorate. In terms of the annual payment, it's a similar system to our tender system, where it's not paid as 1.6 million in one go. It's paid monthly, and it is divided up according to the individual transport operators on a monthly basis.
Sorry, it's a much more basic question I got really. It's like, yeah, there's not enough money in the system for community transport. Who's responsible? Is it Cllr as a body, or is it government funding, or what?
My understanding, we take community transport funding from the general public transport pot, so it's it's something that is within the powers of us within Cllr.
Thank you, Sahira.
Thank you. The community transport team is coming to a group of my residents next week. We're looking forward to that visit. I was with that group this morning actually, and I asked the question again about did they know about this service that existed, and again, you know, people have come back and said no, even though I know most of them would probably use the service because, you know, it's an older group, there are people with health issues, and I kind of reminded people that the service, the minibus is coming to Tinsley next week, and they're going to have a bit of a tour around as well, and people were quite interested to know that, you know, this service exists. So in terms of, you know, it being, I think in one of the workshops we talked about being more visible, being out there in communities, because there are communities that just don't know that the service exists. And I think the more we get the bus out there to meet local groups, the better people will know about it, because sometimes you can put so much information online that if people are digitally excluded or don't really know that the service exists or where to look, they still won't know. So there's nothing like, you know, actually bringing the minibus into the community, because everybody then from my group will go back into the community and talk to other residents about it. So we're really looking forward to the community transport team coming into Tinsley next week, and hopefully I should be able to give you an update on how it went after that. So thank you for us to, you know, for you guys to arrange that for us, because I think it's really important.
Well, thank you, because I know it was your request initially for us to come out, so we're pleased to oblige. I think we absolutely realise that you mentioned, Chair, about could we be promoting this more on the sort of Travel South Yorkshire website? Absolutely realise that, particularly for a large demographic of users of community transport, there is no substitute, as you said, Councillor, for that sort of face-to-face visit and some printed materials as well that are available in the community. So whilst we very much realise there is a space for digital media, because that can often get passed from younger generations through to family members, that we very much see, I think, this first 5 months marketing plan as something that if we'll learn from and adapt to roll out on a longer term basis. It's not just a one-stop hit that we're going to do. But thank you for the feedback.
Brian, I'll take that last question of being asked, because obviously we've got time pressing.
Again, it's going back on promotion, because I sure remember when Jeff Ennis was sat on this committee, he used to always go on about community transport and it not being able to hit areas in Barnsley, but it's about promoting it in villages that are isolated and stuff like that, where there's post offices where you can put materials in, because that's the kind of people what may want to use it in that kind of areas, because it does need promoting more in isolated areas where people may need it to do the shopping and things like that, because it is a good service. I know it's been going for years and years and years, so it's the way you promote it and how you promote it to the market that you're looking to use it, and that's the issue, making sure you hit that market right and using councillors to promote things and think. I mean, it's a good idea.
One last second moment.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's the marketing plan has to be very carefully managed, and we've broken it into several different types of demographics, and we're earmarking the type of promotion according to that type of demographic. And I think there's a number of things to consider. Older people are more and more on social media, but as Councillor Naz has said, nothing beats you can't miss a bus. A bus out there promoting itself is great, and things such as promotion through local libraries, through community centres, the pamphlet block drops, all of that is something that we think will be absolutely part and parcel of it. And it's about the challenges getting into those more remote communities. What we wouldn't want the marketing campaign to do is encourage people who are very happily using mainstream transport to move on to community transport. We want as many people on the mainstream transport as possible, but where people are not using either, that is the absolute demographic gap that we want to target, and that's what we're hoping the marketing plan will achieve. So we'd be really grateful to come back to you in the autumn with the results of how that marketing plan went, and to look at ridership as well, and then see what your thoughts are on the next steps.
Tight for time. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the autumn, if not before. Thank you very much for that, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Devolution White Paper. If you'd like to introduce yourselves and talk to us on this massive piece of legislation with relatively few pieces of paper.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Andy Gates, Director of Development, Collaboration and Culture at the MCA. One of those pieces, my job title referred to devolution, so I'm the devolution lead within SIMCA.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Mike Thomas. I'm Assistant Director of Strategic Finance and Deputy Chief Finance Officer.
So I know that the policy here, quite rightly, is that you've got the slides, so I'm not going to walk you through them. So what I'll do is just introduce and then hopefully open up for some questions. When I came to this, sat in this chair in front of you guys just before Christmas, I said, don't ask me too many questions about what might be in the Devolution White Paper, because I think they're going to publish it. That wasn't me being particularly prescient. I knew they were going to publish it before Christmas, and they did. So the 16th of December, to much fanfare, which was a very exciting Christmas present, pre-Christmas present for those of us who like this sort of thing, which I do. I've been at this this organisation for 11 years in May, and our devolution journey has been an interesting one in South Yorkshire. That's to be polite. We've not always been in the vanguard of devolution. We've not always been the kind of poster child for it. Where I think the white paper I think signals, at least to me, very clearly that we are now in the vanguard of the next wave of devolution. And if you sort of take the time, which I don't propose you do, to read the sort of devolution white paper in its entirety, I think it's 118 pages or so of them, South Yorkshire is writ large through it. And in particular, because of our sort of contiguous or coterminous boundaries around how our health, police, reform, public services, transport, skills, employment, all those things are pretty neatly aligned in South Yorkshire, which is great from a government perspective who are looking to kind of do some of that neatening up, tidying up of the local government world, which we're not necessarily impacted upon in South Yorkshire because we're already there. So we are, and the white paper I think signals that we're almost a poster child for that new way of kind of bringing together things at the appropriate geography. So the white paper makes a number of sort of proposals, and of course it is only a signal of intent. This is not yet legislation, but it broadens the existing devolution settlement, and deepens it. So we've got skills devolution already. What the white paper signals is that those things will get a bit more on skills within the current line of it. And transport, it deepens the existing types of things we have on transport. So skills, transport, housing, funding kind of deepens that, but it also broadens our remit as well. And strategic planning is an obvious one that is going to be really interesting and at times probably challenging to work through. But we will be responsible for developing a strategic spatial strategy, development plan, whatever the wording is. So we will have to do that, and that will change the way this organisation works and change what we have to resource and tool up to do so. The other bit, and this goes to the point around our sort of geography, the coterminous or contiguous boundaries, is public service reform. The white paper makes a really clear play that mayoral combined authorities will enter the public service reform space. So how things are delivered to our communities and with our communities. And that's really interesting because that is principally local authority space, and rightly so. So the convening role that mayoralties do, the kind of integration of the things that we're responsible for, like transport, housing, skills, and how they play out at a local place, is the next frontier for us to work through. It's really a part of that growth and reform agenda at the sort of national level. How do you get more or the same level of public services for ever smaller amount of funds going in? And the government placing mayoralties right in the mix of all that. So I describe it as a broadening of the things that we're doing and a deepening of those existing pillars. And we talked very briefly last time about the integrated settlement, which is how the government will fund a lot of this. And that is so from 26-27 onwards, the MCA, along with GM, West Mids, Liverpool City Region, West Yorkshire and the North East, will have an integrated settlement which takes those pillars of funding from transport, from housing, from skills, from bits of DWP, maybe a bit from the Department of Energy and Net Zero, and kind of gives them to us in a kind of integrated settlement, which is over a spending review period, so 3 or 4 years, and it gives us flexibility to move resources across those pillars. Not untrammeled flexibility. We can't spend all of our transport funding on paper clips or skills, but there is definite fungibility across those pillars. So that opens up an enormous amount of work for us to do in the MCA and with our colleagues in the local authorities. And I suspect it also has quite significant implications for how this committee scrutinises the work we do as well. Mike, have I covered everything from a...
Shall I add in a couple of extra bits of flavour? From a purely selfish financial point of view, where the integrated settlement makes a big difference for us is that I would say currently we have in excess of about 40 different funding streams that come to us. And as you well know from local authorities, the bureaucracy around fund management, it differs from government department to government department, and some are particularly onerous regardless of the quantum involved. Integrated settlement is an opportunity to get away from that level of complexity, to streamline that. So for example, if you pick West Midlands and you look at their integrated settlement for next year, 22 funding streams are being put into the mix. Now they do have to fit into the pillars that Andy's described, and he's quite right that there's not maximum fungibility between all the different pillars. For one, local growth, you can move 100% into the others, but you can't do it in reverse from, say, transport or skills. But the thing that I think is really useful for us, and it'll make more efficient use of our resources, is that it's going to take away the competitive bidding regime that we've had to put up with for decades for all of these different income streams. And that is a big step forward for us, because we use up an inordinate amount of officer time preparing bids, and then your time as councillors having to review those and fettling words just to then potentially get a response back to say, no, you haven't got it on this occasion. So that's a big step forward in that sense. And I think also one of the issues that we've grappled with, particularly when we got gain share about 5 years ago, was, okay, we know where we want to get to in terms of big capital investments, but we don't have the flexibility of revenue funding to do the design and feasibility work, or to bring in the capacity that we've perhaps lost from various teams over previous years. Through the integrated settlement, funds such as the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, CRSTS, there will be flexible to convert at least 10% of those capital allocations to revenue, which would then give us that flexibility to be able to invest in the proper design and feasibility work that's required, and hopefully speed up the rate for which we convert schemes from pipeline into implementation. So there are some really big upsides to this, but I think at this point it's probably appropriate, Chair, if we pause and open the floor to questions. So thank you.
Hannah?
Yeah, thank you. I quite like things like this as well, to be honest. It's because I'm a Liberal Democrat, we can't help ourselves. I really appreciate this devolution framework summary that you've put here, because from what little wading I'd done through the document, I was struggling to really get a handle on what was actually being devolved from government down. There's obviously a lot of abolishing a layer of local government and moving those powers up, and the sense that I'd sort of picked up initially was that the new powers for the combined, they're not calling that anymore, strategic authorities, that's it. Yeah, seemed again to be an element of things taken up from the unitary authorities. So this is really helpful, actually, because there are, sort of clearly some things here, statutory role in the governing planning of rail network, that would be really useful if that came down from the centre. So I really appreciate that. There's a couple of abbreviations here that I'm afraid I don't know. LSIPs?
Local Skills Improvement Plans. There's been bore you to death on LSIPs, maybe not today.
It's fine. ALBs?
Arm's length bodies, so yeah, Arts Council.
UKRI.
UK Research and Innovation. Sorry, you're these shouldn't be. Yeah.
It's just out of context, so I struggle to. However, I do still have some concerns, or I guess would like to know more about how it's going to work, particularly around the housing and strategic planning, where currently planning, to some extent it sits with local authorities. There's an illusion, I suppose, of it sitting with local authorities. Local authorities have been obliged to produce those local plans. Does everyone have a local plan now? Have we all managed that? No, still struggling, Sheffield. Bless you. So, and obviously, the planning inspectorate can often override and sort of oversight a lot of that. I don't feel, and I've never felt, that the relationship between the 4 local authorities and the combined authority and with each other is perhaps as good as it could be, and that's one of the reasons why we've pushed for more scrutiny of the other board members, which I'm hoping we're going to get an update on from the mayor. But I would just really like to know if you have any idea how this is going to work. Are local authorities going to lose planning decision making? Are planning regulatory boards going to be abolished? Is that going to sit with the strategic authority? I don't necessarily have a view one way or the other. I'm just interested to know if you know anything more.
So I'll have a go, and I suppose the short answer is not really. The slightly longer answer is the strategic we've made a case for a long time that planning isn't really the biggest barrier to growth in South Yorkshire. We have actually quite proactive planning authorities, and we have lots of land and development sites consented for. But there are probably some questions about the integration of how structures work. And when you layer on mass transit, so tram extension, or if you take on strategic rail, suddenly you're having conversations about rail stations that serve multiple geographies. So that's the kind of sense behind it, that it would make sense for us to layer our big planning with our transport infrastructure, housing infrastructure and employment land. So I think that's it. I don't think there is any appetite or interest in sucking up decision making. I think there's a question about some of that decision making that would go to a Secretary of State, and whether that goes to a mayor, and I don't know, because that will be in legislation and it will be the subject of an enormous amount of to and fro in. But so that's the kind of, I think, the strategic rationale for it. But I think we're sat there going, there's definitely some advantages to it. I think that is probably the political view. But we go at this with our eyes wide open in terms of some of the risks of it as well. And there is a bit of an irony that the government are looking for pace and fixing things quickly. This is not going to happen quickly. We couldn't develop a strategic spatial plan and take it through all of the planning inspectorate stuff quickly. And there's really important conversation about the interplay with where local plans are at right now. So it's, I don't know, this is going to require legislation to clean up and make a lot of this clear.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's quite interesting what you said about South Yorkshire being, to some extent, a bit of a poster child for devolution. You can see why that works. I think it's a fairly manageable sized strategic authority. It's got 4 reasonable sized unitary authorities within it. And it is perplexing that what the government seems to be pushing ahead with at pace, creating county mirror unitaries and shoving them all into random strategic authorities, doesn't seem like it's going to be creating things that matches up with what we've already got here. Just another question, if I might, for a little bit more detail, if you have it, around the health, wellbeing and public service reform. So new bespoke duty in relation to health improvement and health inequalities. Again, to what extent is that a devolution? What is coming? What are they giving us? What are they passing down? Or is that just going to be, well, it's part of your combined integrated settlement and you can do as you please with it?
Excellent question. A duty doesn't give you the kind of, you don't actually have to pay heed to a duty unless you're not fulfilling a particular statutory requirement. So the duty is helpful because it enables you to invest resources against a priority like health, in tackling health inequalities. And I'll leave it to legal colleagues as to whether we have that within our existing. Rebecca's looking at me. So I don't know. When you read the white paper in its entirety around the health stuff, there's a lot of catching up with where places like South Yorkshire are already at. So every mayor, for example, will be expected to chair their integrated care partnership. So there is a reference there which is really interesting about the role that a mayor may play in the appointment of the chair of the integrated care board, which of course is where the resources and decision makings really sit. So the government are clearly looking at ways of inserting the political world into that structure. But that feels quite nascent, really. And yeah, duty doesn't bring with it the kind of health budget, and nor would we probably want it. But that's beyond my pay grade to determine whether we'd want.
So there's a lot of stuff that we've already got to some extent, and we're waiting for others to acquire those and catch up, and an awful lot of watch this space as well. Okay, how exciting! Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take Brian and then I'll take Douglas.
Mine's a bit of a political comment, because clearly this is going back to the old county council days and just giving the mayor the power. I can remember when the county council used to sit in Barnsley at top where the market is. Well, there used to be a building there, and it was South Yorkshire County Council, and Margaret Thatcher did away with it in 1986, and did away with Ken Livingstone's power base and everything else. And it seems that the government's now got its 11 most of the mayors in, and it's trying to put the power back into their hands and take, basically, some of the decisions what the county council used to make about strategic transport, used to be made at the county council level, used to be dealt with at that level. The issue regarding planning, I think, is going to be more difficult. Like Barnsley, Rotherham's got its housing allocation plan, and it's online with the government strategy on that, and I think they've come to an agreement with the additional houses what the government wants in Rotherham. So basically we've got our housing planning strategy, so it's basically going from a county council and putting more powers into a mayor's hands, and giving it, because it's easier to make decisions through a mayor's hand, through a smaller body of people. And I know what Anna talked about, when do the 4 leaders get on? Well, I'd like to see how they'll get on after mayor's elections, so it will be more difficult in future, so it will be interesting. Sorry, it was a political point, I had to make it, Chair.
Douglas.
Yeah, no, Brian makes some fair points there. I just have a very simple question: what new powers are being devolved to local councils? Well, I mean, is that the answer? Yeah. So no powers being devolved to local councils, some powers and functions being taken away from local councils to bigger bodies at regional level. Yeah, it's hard to see how it's called devolution. Making political points again, but yeah.
I don't see anything in the white paper that takes a power up from a local authority into the MCA. That directly, I don't. But point aside, and I'm again looking at Rebecca. But this is about taking stuff down rather than lifting things up. Yeah.
Well, the specific things, I mean, think about Anne's point, we talked about local plans, so sort of local plan making is very much a district council function at the moment. I think the proposal now is to have it done at mayoral level, so that would be an example of something taken away. A specific other one is taxi licensing, because, you know, that was floated as something. What's the plan for taking taxi licensing away from local councils?
So, yeah, Councillor, I think as with a few things in this paper, it's very light on detail at the moment. So we don't have any information about what that looks like. We do know that there's going to be a consultation. So that's something that, you know, we will certainly look at and feed into, as I'm sure constituent councils will as well. But we don't have the detail as to exactly what's proposed in that space yet.
If I can, Chair, what I would say is in March last year, when we were part of the Level 4 devolution deal arrangements discussions, the 4 leaders and the Mayor wrote to the Secretary of State at the time, Michael Gove, and made it very clear their position on that they didn't think that this was something around private hire and taxi licensing that needed to be done at sort of this geography. So there was a political position sort of established there. And I couldn't possibly comment, but, you know, the government sort of acknowledged that there are certain places gunning for this. They really want it, and it makes sense to work on their geography, and where you've got properly closely knit urban centres, maybe there's some sense in it. So but that doesn't, and I think that's why they want to consult, is because it's not quite as clean cut for other parts of the country.
I know, because we're going to have to move on.
Yes, sounds like something the West Mids might like that. I think just to come back to Douglas's point, my sense is exactly the same, and it might not necessarily relate to South Yorkshire, but where you have a devolution paper that is abolishing every single district council and taking that up to a unitary authority, and these unitary authorities are not going to be the size of any of ours. They're going to have more in common with your North Yorkshire, your Buckingham, your Cornwall. That is absolutely the very opposite of devolution, and I think that's what makes us devolution obsessives a little anxious about what might start coming next in the legislation. I hope I'm wrong, and personally, I like the strategic authority model in terms of its ability to force those 4 local authorities to coordinate and work together in residents' best interest, because people do not live their lives within local authority boundaries. But I'm anxious to see how it plays out for us, because I know there's a lot of people concerned it's not going to play out well in other county areas.
Question, Douglas.
Again, just you triggered something there, Hannah. Actually, there was an interesting, there's a proposal to sort of, I think, go from a more consensus model of getting the 4 districts and the mayor together to one where it's a simple majority. So basically allowing, if the mayor can get 2 authorities on board with him, then you can just forget the views of the other 2 authorities. So that could lead to more division in South Yorkshire. I mean, it has been known before. Has there been any thinking in the authority here about how that might play out?
Not with me, there hasn't.
Before I wrap up, just one quick one. Have we got any idea of dates for committee and report stage in the Commons for this at all, or is it?
They've established a build team, so there's a bunch of very talented civil servants trying to turn this into legislation. Lots of the white paper don't require legislation, and they'll just kind of start happening, and you'll see it already. Council of Nations and regions, it codified a lot of things they're already doing. So the stuff that doesn't require legislation, they're kind of cracking on with, and we're obviously part of that process.
Thank you very much for that. As update as we've got on sort of the sparse lack of detail white paper. We're going to move on now to item 13 quickly. Rebecca's talked about there, so I'll hand over to Sarah.
Yes, keeping it quick. So the scrutiny protocol was published just over a year ago. It gives us as strategic authorities guidance about how we deliver a robust scrutiny function, what that looks like. The report in front of you sets out what some of the key areas of focus have been for us as Cllr in the past year, and it looks to what the next steps are in implementing the protocol. So crucially, in the devolution white paper, you've just heard the government's committed to undertaking targeted engagement in a number of policy areas, and one of those is the scrutiny protocol itself. They've committed to a review of how it operates locally. So we will be asked to work with government to inform that review. We have opportunities to tell them what our experience has been, successes, challenges. So when the protocol was published, we from the outset worked with the scrutiny committee, and we're about to embark on another process of committee effectiveness. There's a survey which I encourage you all to respond to, and also a workshop in the diary where we can look to unpick some of these outstanding elements. So welcome feedback now. I know we don't have too much time, but we've got a few opportunities in front of us to involve yourselves as members in what we then, how we then work with government about what implementation of the protocol looks like in South Yorkshire.
Josh.
Is there any scope in this report to add a recommendation now to call on the board to implement the protocol in full, and then perhaps tag on to that particular key principles?
Yes, there is. put that proposal forward, because I understand West Yorkshire implemented it in full already. So
Yeah, no, Chair, I'm happy to put that forward, that we make that recommendation to the board to implement it in full as soon as possible.
any objections to that? One of the just an aside on that is one of the things that I think I was led to believe that they're waiting for the devolution white paper to see what it said about the scrutiny paper to see whether that was going to be amended, and I don't believe it has been, has it? My understanding.
The scrutiny protocol.
Yeah.
No, the protocol itself hasn't, but the government has committed to carrying out a review of the protocol. But what they've said is they want to go further with scrutiny. So the overview and scrutiny committees will remain a vital part of local accountability. But also they want to look at the wider oversight arrangements. So they're going to review the scrutiny protocol and look at external scrutiny around value for money. In particular, there's reference to a local public accounts committees. So there isn't detail yet as to what that will look like, but that is referenced within the white paper.
Okay. Hannah.
So if they're wanting to go further, that implies that what we have already could and should be implemented in full, and there will simply be perhaps more to come on top of that. So it's not like they say, well, it might change next time. If it's a go further, then they could and should press on with this, so that they're having to do less when that further review comes down the line.
My understanding, because they've been talking about one of the things that Sarah can about the Public Accounts Committee. It's not quite clear how that's going to work, but that will take on looking at the finances of not just this authority, but all the authorities under umbrella. I can't quite work out how far and how deep it's necessarily going to go, do we?
I don't think we have the detail yet on that, Chair. Like many things in the white paper, so we'll have to wait and see. I think what the proposals are.
Douglas.
Yeah, so question for you, Rebecca, is with their proposal, I think we're all in agreement here this should be implemented, but is this on the authority's work plan already? And is there any known objection by officers or members of the authority?
So there is a proposal for this to be tabled at a meeting of the Combined Authorities Policy and Strategy Committee. So that will be taken forward for discussion with leaders and the Mayor.
The additional scrutiny that I was reported back at there's a vice chairs meeting across all local combined authorities, and one of them was that there in the devolution bill there is this ability to appoint commissioners that are directly appointed by the mayor, and they can duplicate the role of the board members, but we would have the ability to scrutinise them, but I'm not sure what the powers we would to appoint to have what powers we would have if to compel them to do anything if we would. So that's detail that was given at the meeting. So there's some really strange things. Right.
They're acting on behalf of the mayor. We should have the authority to bring them to a committee. If they're spending money on behalf of the mayor and making recommendations on behalf of the mayor, surely the scrutiny committee should have the authorisation to bring anybody, because basically you can call them a commissioner, you can call them what they want. They're basically, in my eyes, consultants, private consultants doing a job on behalf of somebody, because they don't want to pay somebody full time to do it. I've been in local government too long. I've seen that many changes. They just come round and round again, and they just call it a different name. As somebody was saying something over there in the committee, and my wife says, well, we used to doing that social work 10 years ago, and we used to call it this.
Like to add, Sarah, on this, because obviously ongoing body of work, and we look to see what the further and deeper or whatever it is means, and what comes to fruition there, because we did wait an awfully long time for the for the original scrutiny protocol to come forward. That seemed to be in the works of Whitehall for a long time, and so that's the thing, is to then to see what additional bodies work, because the implication was that they're looking at a wider scrutiny, maybe more members, maybe more substitutes, that sort of thing. There's an ongoing across the country about quorums for scrutiny committees and what that's going to look like. There were lots of things they were talking about. They talked to ministers and people in Whitehall about what their plans were, but everything was quite, I wouldn't say necessarily vague, but it wasn't fully formed. Douglas.
Yeah, it's just a question on that. I mean, so, Brian, you talk about the commissioners that seem to, I mean, it seems to be that, you know, one of the sort of themes of devolution is to replace, certainly in other parts of the country, replace locally elected district councillors with unelected consultants or commissioners, whatever. And I just wonder, from what you picked up about the change in scrutiny, and we'll see, all of us here are elected councillors from the constituent districts. Is one of the proposals to be set up a sort of a scrutiny panel of unelected people who would presumably be appointed by the authority in some way, rather than elected?
So I think there is scope for co-opted members on scrutiny committees, and that kind of already exists. Again, light on the detail of what's, you know, they might be looking for more of. It's certainly a possibility, but no, decisions on that yet.
The only thing of any public accounts committee, which is sort of in the vaguest, is that they were looking at an independent chair of any public accounts committee. The other thing that appears to have disappeared is the ability, is that there was going to be a sort of grand committee in any particular mayoral area of MPs, and their ability to be pulled together to ask questions, which in South Yorkshire may be not so interesting, but in other places, then that could have potentially been more problematic for any given mayor at any time. But that seems to have disappeared from any proposals.
I find it amazing when they talk about an independent chair. It's who then appoints that independent chair. And I'm not being funny, I've been around a long time, but an independent chair, who appoints the independent chair? Is it the mayor? Is it the four leaders? Whoever appoints them? I mean, I don't get that, and I've never got it. And I'll be honest, I've got my political views, and I believe that it's people who's democratically elected should be there to scrutinise people. We're the people what the public have put the trust in, and that should happen. And I don't agree with independent mayors. And I think as a scrutiny committee we should make that point as well.
Okay. We are currently awaiting the arrival of Mayor Oliver Coppard for the meeting for the next item on the agenda. Shall we break just for a second, and if he turns up? Thank you very much. Hello, good afternoon. We resume. We have Mayor Oliver Coppard. Welcome to our meeting, and here to answer questions. And the first question is from Josh. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Oliver. We've just passed recommendations to the MCA board asking for the MCA to implement the government scrutiny protocol in full. Will you support this?
So
The advice that I received from Rebecca and others is absolutely to make sure that we are at the forefront of how I am scrutinised, transparency and accountability. And I've said from day one, I want to be the most transparent and accountable mayor in the country. So anything I am advised to do by lawyers in the room and others about kind of how we can do that best, I am keen to do. But I'm actually keen to go further than that, because things like, for instance, every month I go on the radio and answer questions directly from the public. Mayor's question times, which we've held right across the region, the public meetings on buses, where I held last year, I think in excess of 30 meetings, I think you were at one of them, on buses, in order to, again, answer questions from the public directly. So not just kind of the formal bits of the overview scrutiny, which I'm always happy to engage in and do that fully and properly, and the MCA clearly is keen to do all of that. I think there are some areas where I would like to see some progress, where I know we've not been able to make some progress, but more broadly I'm keen to do whatever we can to make sure that there is faith and confidence in this system, and for me that's about transparency and accountability.
Thank you. Hannah?
Yeah, on that, have you managed to make any progress with persuading the other members of the board to get involved in the overview and scrutiny process?
So my understanding is there is enthusiasm to do that. I think that probably there's an issue with sort of dates and diaries and calendars and making sure that there is time available, and obviously we will have to provide briefings and all the rest of it. Again, like I say, I think we have to be as transparent and accountable as possible. Clearly, members of the board have portfolios that I'm sure they would like to come here and talk to you about. So we're happy to work with colleagues to do that. I can't speak on behalf of colleagues, but very happy to support that process, because I think it is important that we make sure that everybody is available to answer questions on the work that the MCA is doing.
Can we expect to see a session with at least one of those individuals in our diaries in the next quarter then, before our next meeting?
I'm happy to try. Yeah.
We can be flexible.
Yeah.
We like teams.
I'm sure. Thank you.
And then if I...
No, I was going to one question at a time, and then come back to you. Douglas?
Second time, I've forgotten that. Yeah. So, I was just building on the questions there. I mean, you've made yourself available, on the radio, public meetings, and everything. And I just want to draw out this distinction between media opportunities, which you're very good at, and that is a good thing, but also the in-depth scrutiny. So, for instance, we've just had a discussion about what on earth happened to all the adult skills and training for jobs money that. So we're mysteriously, we don't have a written paper on about it, but we've been looking at a question of millions of pounds being returned to government over several years, and it's obviously something we've got concern about. It's quite an in-depth sort of scrutiny, which is quite different to sort of relatively easy things like bus franchising, where everyone within the right mind supports better buses. So the question for you is really how you square that off and how you can ensure that the boring but important aspect of scrutiny happens in just the way that Hannah's mentioned, as opposed to the publicity and raising the profile of the mayor and the combined authority and the public.
I wouldn't ever dare to call this boring, frankly, just for the record. I don't think there are alternatives. Clearly I am always happy to engage in scrutiny, and I will come here as much as you want me to come here and answer questions for as long as you want me to answer questions, because I think it's important that I do just that. Clearly had audit committee just the other day, and again kind of engage in that process fully and frankly, and that is important. I think you're absolutely right that there are some in-depth things here that will not be asked largely in public meetings, and that's absolutely right. You fulfil a different function, and I'm grateful for you doing that function, because this system would not work if it were not for the time and commitment that you all put in, and I'm grateful for that. I think there probably are ways that we can do this better, quite honestly. I think there are kind of different ways. I know other mayors have talked about different forms of scrutiny in addition to this. So Andy Burnham, for instance, has talked about a grand committee of MPs. I'm not sure that's right for South Yorkshire, but there are obviously different models, and I've asked Rebecca to have a look at what some of those different models might look like. But I think it's also important for me to be out there with the public, talking to the public, and that's not always about publicity, to be frank. Clearly there is a publicity angle to kind of being on the radio once a month. I'm not sure it's always good publicity, frankly, given some of the questions that I get and the way that I answer them, but it's always good to do it. But some of the meetings that I hold, as Josh will describe, are not always the best attended meetings in the world. So the bus meetings that we hold don't always attract a massive audience. That's not about me sort of promoting myself or the MCA. That's about being out front of people who want to ask me any question they would like to and getting an answer directly. And I think it's one of the massive benefits of a mayor and devolution. There is somebody in your region who you can see, who you can go and talk to, who can answer questions about big decisions on your behalf and hopefully respond by changing things in a way that you would like. And I think that's fundamentally important and one of the big benefits of devolution. I would not describe that as scrutiny in that sense, but it is certainly about accountability and it is about transparency.
I would like to ask a question, and this is slightly technical. I was written to by somebody, a resident yesterday, and he asked, because he has a South Yorkshire Senior Citizens Concessionary Pass for rail.
It's not.
Or whatever it is, I don't know. Anyway, he was saying that basically he appears to be on the Trainline app. The fare goes up when he says he's got this when he's got a pass, and he wants to know whether Trainline potentially are skimming a little bit extra money because they're getting the extra money because some of the part of the fee is being paid by South Yorkshire. I'm not asking you to answer this now, but is this something that you can look into?
I mean, definitely happy to look into it. It's not something, you're right, I'm afraid I can't answer right a second. I know that when I buy tickets on the train line, they do add a booking fee. So I'm assuming there's a booking fee on there, which probably adds to the cost. There are different ways of buying tickets, which don't necessarily require a fee, but I'm sure happy to. I'm very happy to look at that. I obviously can't control what the train line do as a private company, but happy to look at it.
Right, Brian.
On the devolution bill, where you could have additional powers such as planning and licensing, what's your views on that?
So, firstly, I don't think any decision, clearly it was in the white paper, the devolution white paper, and as we all know around the table, white papers are simply sort of statements of intention rather than firm commitments. They are essentially consultation documents. So, grateful for you raising it because it does kind of hopefully allow us to have a conversation about what that might mean for South Yorkshire. I'm keen for South Yorkshire to work closely with the government to take on whatever powers and responsibilities the government think are right for English regions to have, and we're right at the forefront of that conversation, as you know, in South Yorkshire. So level 4 devolution deal, integrated settlement, you know, really opening up the opportunities for South Yorkshire. We will be a strategic authority under this government's plans, and that is a good thing because we haven't always been in that position at in South Yorkshire, and it unlocks a load of things for us that otherwise, not least more money, which otherwise wouldn't have come. In terms of licensing and planning, because it is just at this moment in time a consultation exercise essentially, and we will go through this sort of statutory processes to get that into law, I'm fairly kind of open to essentially having that conversation, not just with the government, but with colleagues around the table, cross-party colleagues as well, because I want to know kind of how people feel about that here in South Yorkshire. Now, I'm ambitious for devolution in South Yorkshire, which means my starting point is always give us as much flexibility, freedom, control here in the region as possible, because I think that gives us more ability to do the things we want to do versus have things done to us. But on licensing and planning is such a kind of new part of the system for us in the MCA that quite honestly, I don't quite know how we're going to kind of engage with that system yet, because the government haven't told us exactly how they want to do it, and we don't know in the region how we want to approach it, myself and the other leaders, but clearly a bigger set of people as well. But my starting point is always to try and be ambitious in those spaces.
Hannah?
Yeah, thank you. So, Mayor's obviously been in the news recently, having hired a speechwriter at an alleged annual salary of £62,000. Just giving you the opportunity really to, you know, explain that. Not hired yet, did you say? If you point me in the direction of the job ads, Oliver, I might apply for that one.
Genuinely, those, you know, I saw that article, you might have seen I shared it on my own social media, the article, which wasn't necessarily a positive article about us hiring a speechwriter and media manager here in the organisation. As I said when I shared that information, last year I gave hundreds of speeches, and I think colleagues around the table in particular would understand you can't always write that number of speeches yourself and need people to help you to do it. Those speeches were, I think, really important in terms of being transparent and accountable. They're really important in terms of bringing in investment. Been talking about some investment that we brought in from Holtec, £325 million at least, coming into the region as a result of speeches I have given in no small part when I have presented to the Nuclear Industries Association, American investors, senators, everybody from American senators to members of our community groups. And I'm really proud that we're able to do it. That's really important, but I can't write all those speeches myself, and I don't think people around this table or anywhere else would expect me to turn up and not be prepared, and therefore not present or represent South Yorkshire very well. So speechwriters is really important. That person won't just be writing speeches, quite honestly, they'll also be writing remarks, they'll be writing quotes and everything else, and that's just a really important part of how we communicate as politicians, and I think that is absolutely right. They'll also have a role in terms of the comms team, in terms of media. So, you know, clearly we respond to any number of media requests, loads every single day that come into this organisation, and we need people to do that. I'm proud, quite honestly, that we pay a decent wage for those jobs. I think it's right that we do, because we attract good people to those jobs as a result. Good people should apply for those jobs as a result of that. I think that's absolutely right, and I will not have anyone say that we should either get people on the cheap. I don't think that does a service to South Yorkshire, or not have those people to do those jobs effectively. I think they are necessary, important jobs, and I'm pleased that we're hiring for them.
Thank you, Hannah. Josh? Coming back to the scrutiny again, the protocol was published in November 2023, so why is it taking so long to implement that? We've seen other MCA authorities implement it in full. I think West Yorkshire might be an example, actually. And this has quite important significance, actually, because we were talking earlier, you know, as Councillor Douglas says, we were talking earlier about the free courses for jobs allocation. The MCA, from that analysis by FE Weekly, is the worst authority in percentage terms for sending money back to government. So what's taken so long, and will you sort of speed it up?
So just on that last point, sorry, important to say, my understanding is South Yorkshire is now, for the first time in a while, if not ever, is spending its full allocation of money. So that hasn't happened before, and that's the progress we've made under my leadership. We've got a brilliant team in now, so I can't take the credit, but they're the ones that have done the work, and we are in a fundamentally different place. So that's my understanding of where we are on that skills money, albeit I accept previously was not the case. On scrutiny more broadly, I think we have made significant progress on the protocol. I was going through it yesterday with Rebecca. There are obviously some places where we still need to make some progress. We're keen to do that as quickly as possible. There are some issues which I would like to resolve more swiftly than others, and we will do that as quickly as we can. That's not just about me, clearly, that's about the other members of the MCA, and we do that with them, in partnership with them, but we're trying to do it as quickly as we can, and I want to get there. And as I said, scrutiny, accountability, transparency, really important.
Thank you for that. Douglas?
Yeah, thanks. I've just had two themes going on. So one was the way you said that it's good that you're elected and people can contact you directly if they've got questions about what's going on in their area. And then there's a similar theme, well, related theme, in the Devo white paper, which is about, as things go on in time, any new initiatives from government, the default delivery organisation will be the combined authorities rather than local councils. And I was just thinking about how that's worked out with things like, on things like homelessness, where the delivery and expertise and staff and knowledge are based in the district councils here in South Yorkshire, but government's increasingly coming to the combined authority that simply doesn't have that infrastructure. It's not a criticism of anyone, it's just it doesn't have the infrastructure, staff, knowledge, etc. And it's, you know, it seems very indirect and duplicating what goes on. And I'm wondering if there's a link there. So although in this area, in South Yorkshire, it wouldn't change, for new mayors coming in other areas, they're there to replace, under the Devo paper, hundreds of other locally elected representatives for people. And so the question is your message to mayors that you think that what you said about it's good that people can contact their mayor directly, is that a good substitute for all the hundreds of locally elected reps in those areas? And will the mayor be able to handle all that sort of new delivery of stuff from that's currently done by and delivered by local councils?
No, that's not my message to mayors. That might be your message to mayors, but it's not mine. I think there was more than one question in there, clearly. So in terms of kind of the role of the mayor in new areas, I probably don't want to stray too far into other areas because A, I don't know them as well, but B, I don't think it would be politically smart to kind of start telling other areas how they want to respond. But here in South Yorkshire, clearly the government are intent on giving the MCA more powers and responsibilities. I think that is more about growing the pie than it is us getting a bigger slice of the existing pie. So in terms of more responsibilities coming to South Yorkshire, yes, absolutely, the MCA will have a bigger role. But on planning, for instance, my understanding is they're not going to take powers away from the councils and give them to the mayor. They're potentially going to allow me to have more of a strategic role that otherwise would have to go up to the Secretary of State. Now, clearly, that's not, as I said in response to the earlier question, that's not a decision that has been taken yet, but that's my understanding of how that system could or should work. I do not sit here wanting to take things off the councils. That is not how I feel about devolution. There are appropriate levels for things to be done at. Some of that will be best done by parish councils, for instance. There are just things that otherwise are better done by other people who are closest to either the issues or the communities themselves. I do think the more power and control we can get into South Yorkshire more broadly, grow the pie, the better, because it allows us, as I say, to take decisions more closely to the people that they affect. So we are working at the moment to understand exactly what the implications may be from the white paper. As I say, it's a consultation document at this point, essentially, so it's not clear exactly what will happen and when, but we need to be ready for that. So on things like, for instance, planning and house building, we don't have that capacity right now. We've got a relatively small team in that space, so we'll have to skill up. But that is not beyond us. We need to work with our colleagues in councils to make sure that we're not just simply robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we're just not like borrowing people from different teams or hiring people off our council colleagues. That's absolutely right. I don't have an ambition to try and take stuff off the councils, albeit if the government tell me I've got to do certain things, got to do certain things. I think homelessness is an interesting one because actually the government have also given more money to, for instance, Sheffield Council for homelessness. So I don't think it is as simple or straightforward simply as to say the MCA is going to take responsibility for homelessness and the councils won't have that responsibility. I think they might also just be saying we're trying to take more decisions about homelessness closer to those communities, and I do think we can join up more effectively because to a certain extent on homelessness, if people leave Barnsley town centre where they might be living rougher on the street, sometimes what they do is just come down the road into Sheffield. So there is a region-wide approach that we do need, albeit councils also need both money and powers to be able to deal with some of those problems effectively.
I've got one question and then it's Brian. In late last year, the government announced there was all this money for potholes and street repairs. Now, Sheffield City Council didn't get any of that money. Does that mean that South Yorkshire got proportionally less of the overall pot that the government's going out, giving out to councils? Is that the case?
The truth is, Chair, I don't know the answer to that question in terms of proportionally whether or not we got more or less. So can we find out the answer and write to you? Do you mind? I don't know. I don't want to mislead, so I'd rather get the detail right.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Brian.
On the way in today, I heard a statement that Ed Miliband were looking at mini nuclear power stations. In past, South Yorkshire has always been a nuclear-free zone, so I'd just like to know what your views are on that.
So. Small modular nuclear reactors are essentially the next generation of nuclear facilities. They are the way in which places like China are increasingly turning to get net zero power, sustainable power. And so Ed Miliband has said there is something called the GBN, the Great British Nuclear Competition going on, led by the government, which is, forgive the jargon, like down selecting companies that may provide those power stations in the UK. So what they will try and do, I think, is select 2 companies from, I think, a shortlist of 4 or 5 right now who are interested in building those across the country. The assumption is that one of them will be Rolls-Royce as a national brand and one of them will be another company. I don't know if that's true or not. And that decision should be taken at some point this year. South Yorkshire is in the running in that space because Holtec, that American company that I've mentioned previously, Holtec are one of the companies that are in the running for that contract to build those power stations, which means essentially building the equipment that goes into them, the supply chains around it. That's not the nuclear material. That's the pipes, for instance, that go into the framework for the materials, etc., etc. So it's the kind of the mechanics that sit around the factory, the SMR. Plant. And that's where South Yorkshire has huge capabilities and expertise. Essentially, the forging, the fabrication, the forge masters already kind of make a load of this stuff already. They're one of the only places in the world actually that can create some of the vessels for the nuclear fuel, not the nuclear fuel itself. So I'm really supportive of that supply chain. I think it's really important that we grab as much of that supply chain as possible, because it's good jobs, engineering jobs largely in the industries of the future. It's about net zero, which I think around this table, hopefully looking around this table, we all agree with. I think we all agree that we need to get to net zero as quickly as possible, and that's going to require that sort of energy and that sort of material. I think all the projections I've seen on how we're going to run our country in terms of energy rely on that base load from new nuclear and nuclear technologies. I know there is a debate in the Green Party, but I think more broadly speaking, we are all in favour of new technologies that can get us to net zero. And so South Yorkshire can be at the forefront of those technologies. That's not about having a nuclear power plant in South Yorkshire. That's about the supply chains around creating those for other people to take part in. What the government's plans are for where those new nuclear sites might go, I don't know. But we're talking about the technologies to build it rather than having the power plants in South Yorkshire.
Hannah.
It's a fascinating line we have to walk on the topic of clean energy, isn't it? I have a question also on a theme about jobs. Anyone would think I was tired of earning £13,000 a year from the hours I work. You have obviously taken on a huge amount of extra responsibility over the last year with the integration of the Police and Crime Commissioner role into your already fairly large job. I know that you were really keen not to rush the appointment of a deputy mayor to take on that PCC role. I just wondered if you could give us an update on your timeline for that.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to say that I think we now have the person who I want to be able to hire, but HR, let's not spoil the surprise. For HR reasons, you can't go for both jobs. That's my only critique. For HR reasons, clearly, that person is currently in a role, so I don't want to talk about that person too much. But I think we have that person soon. I would hope. I've already said next few weeks. Ideally, I would like to be able to announce that. Some of that is reliant on her and her job, etc. So I kind of want to. It's not just in my gift as much as I would like it to be, because she is an absolutely normal person who has a proper job, and therefore kind of we need to work with her. But yes, I would like to be able to announce it as soon as possible and bring that person in, because it is. I've always said I want a deputy. I've just I've not been keen to just sort of hand it over as quickly as possible, because I'm keen to learn and listen and kind of get to know the role, and I think I have done that, and I've actually found it a fascinating experience, albeit there have been some, as you've seen just this week, some tragic incidents during my time as the person with responsibilities for policing and crime. But right that we bring in a deputy, and I think we found someone brilliant, so really excited about that.
And is that explicitly going to be the PCC role? Is that how you're going to split it up, mayor versus deputy, or are you looking at another sort of division?
So they will be the deputy mayor for policing and crime, may have additional responsibilities around that, because I think given the person that we've hired, that might be appropriate. I'm happy to answer questions about this further when we get that person, but it will be a similar model, if not the same model as is used in other areas. So in West Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, etc., they have that deputy mayor role, albeit, as I've always said, the buck will always stop with me, and that is right, but that person will take on day-to-day responsibilities in order to be able to work with the police and other groups to deliver on the role.
One more question from Douglas. Any more questions? And one more from Josh.
Go on then. So just on that subject, we had a discussion about commissioners. So the government's going to be keen on mayors appointing commissioners. So what's your plans to appoint commissioners, which I assume are like the deputy mayor, which of course is not a deputy mayor in the sense they're not elected, they're simply appointed, but just presumably bypassing the normal recruitment processes in a way. But what areas would you look to appoint commissioners in to, carry out decisions? And also, in the future, would you, in terms of devolution, given we've established that there's no powers being devolved to local councils, possibly some being moved from local councils upwards to regional level, is it fair to say that in the future you'll effectively be the Secretary of State for South Yorkshire?
Never heard that before. It's not how I would describe myself. I'm the mayor of South Yorkshire. I am South Yorkshire's mayor, more importantly, actually, is how I would describe myself. I probably don't want to get into the linguistics of what that means, but Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has always been clear that he sees the mayors as part of his extended Cabinet. I think he has said that publicly. We have very close relationships with the government. I was with Rachel Reeves earlier today. I was with the Deputy Prime Minister just over 2 weeks ago in South Yorkshire. She came to lead the Mayor's Council. You know, spend a lot of time with government ministers, as you'd expect, working closely with various different teams and departments. I am South Yorkshire's Mayor and proud to have that title. I wouldn't try and change that title. I'm happy to be visible, lead on any number of issues, take responsibility for South Yorkshire, but I probably wouldn't give it that brand. In terms of our plans for commissioners, frankly, we don't have any plans for any more commissioners right now. We have got a brilliant active travel commissioner, Ed Clancy, who I think everybody would agree has done a really good job. Proud Barnsley lad, who has come in and done a brilliant job on active travel, and that's been great. So we've got a good model in South Yorkshire. If we did want to extend out that model, I'm conscious that, for instance, Sadiq, the Mayor of London, has a load of deputy mayors, which actually does give him a huge amount more capacity to do more things, be in more places, and help more people. No, they're appointed. No, they're appointed by Sadiq. So it's essentially that model, as I understand it. The truth is, I've not looked into it too much because it's not on my radar. I'm not saying we won't. I'm not saying we will. I just haven't really kind of given it much thought. As I say, that white paper is a long way off from being law or legislation. As you know, though, because we've got the Active Travel Commissioner, there's nothing stopping us right now from hiring a commissioner in other spaces if we wanted to, and we haven't so far, which probably gives you an indication of where we are on that question. But things change, people change, times change, and so who knows, but haven't got any plans for now.
Last question from Josh.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Oliver. A few meetings ago, we were here talking about your manifesto, and one of the things we talked about was, of course, the big clean, as you called it, in South Yorkshire. So how are you getting on with that? The reason why I raise this is I've been having to go to Northern General, which of course is situated in an interesting community called Page Hall, and it's quite bleak, to say the least. So on things like this, what's the situation, Oliver?
Well, firstly, I hope you're okay. Secondly, I definitely would not describe Page Hall as bleak. Page Hall is a beautiful community in lots of ways, albeit it needs more investment and support in terms of the infrastructure and the environment. That is absolutely true. The Big Clean is a really important project for me. It will be articulated more in the police and crime plan, and we need to develop that project. It's a new thing for South Yorkshire because it's not just about litter, it's about community clean-up, it's about community payback potentially. So using people who are going through the criminal justice system and potentially using them to do some of that work to give back to our community. It's also about investment and how we can invest in some of that, and the business plan that we're bringing forward will to a certain extent find ways to invest in that sort of work. I've actually just been talking to the Sheffield bid team earlier today about how we might be able to work with them to do some of that work because they already invest in that space, and I would like to do more. I do think it holds us back. Kind of the state of the public realm after 14 years of Tory and Lib Dem government has been in steady decline. Sorry to so you caught a stray there, Hannah, I'm afraid. Has been in decline. I think it's got markedly worse over the last number of years because of the state of local government finance and not been able to invest in the way that they would have liked. So we do need to do something, I think, to address that balance. You'll see that on Supertram, for instance, in South Yorkshire, where we have got the capability and the remit, we have already invested to clean up that network. So the stops and the trams now have a dedicated in-house cleaning team, and I would like to do more across the public realm. We have to get the investment vehicle right, and we haven't got there yet, but I am absolutely committed to it because I think it's really important. Everybody, I think we all speak to, and we all represent South Yorkshire communities in different ways, would say, I think, that they want to see their area look nicer, be cleaner, be more cared for, be more looked after. And right now that just doesn't feel like it has been the case for any number of years. So I would like to get there. I'd like to work with all of you, frankly, to be able to kind of make sure that we're doing that across South Yorkshire in the right way. But we need to get the investment bit right, and we haven't quite got there.
Thank you for that. That's exactly why I asked the question about potholes and pavements, to see whether South Yorkshire was shortchanged by the present government. So please, can you get that back to me? Thank you, everybody, for the meeting. Close the meeting at 4:10. Thank you everybody for who's been here today.